Welcome, Naomi.
Hello, Peter. Thanks for having me.
Today we're going to dive into social media for spiritual practice. Naomi is a Unitarian Universalist minister, uh, who really specializing in social media for spiritual practice and spiritual practice online. So online and offline spiritual practice. I've known Naomi since the early days of Twitter. I was trying to look to see exactly when we first connected. Like, I got Twitter's go back to at least 2010, but then I didn't want to go further. So I'm delighted to have you here with me. And for those of you tuning in, if you want to ask questions, use the YouTube chat. If you're looking at this on Twitter or Facebook or anywhere it's been shared, make sure you go to the YouTube player and chat there. So you can say hi in the chat and tell us where you're tuning in from. So our conversation today is about social media for spiritual practice. And so we've been having conversations about spirituality, technology, and also community and congregational life for years now.
hmm
Lately, there's been a lot happening in the news with um, social media companies, controversy, news about how social media is impacting people's health. People question, oh, should we unplug this, turn off that, uninstall this app? And so, kind of building off a conversation we had recently, we wanted to get into how to use digital tools with intention and purpose, really, to promote and support spiritual growth, spiritual practice. And you're the expert. For those of you who don't know, I do a lot of work with organizations, nonprofits, congregations, integrating face-to-face and digital connecting strategies, community building. Uh, and over the years, as I've been kind of adapting myself to digital life, Naomi, you're one of the people who's inspired me, and our conversations have just really kept me energized and inspired.
Oh,
So,
thank you.
so I thought we'd start with uh, just kind of look at some of the ways that we can use social media for spiritual practice. For some people, there are many things that we default to. Yes, there's social media sites, Facebook, Twitter, whatever, and we can interact, but there's a larger ecosystem of ways people are, tools, communities. So can you
Yeah,
just tell us a little bit about the different ways people are using social media for spiritual practice?
sure. Well, it all comes down to discernment, as you already pointed out. It's what we're seeking to have in our feeds, and those communities that we're choosing to participate in at a distance. So whether you're looking for however you name your religious community, whether it's a sanghar, gurdwara, or a church, or a synagogue, there are religious versions of those communities in social media and out there in the digital world. Some of them are working through Facebook groups. Some of them are offering things over YouTube. Some of them work through different apps like Insight Timer. Some
Oh,
of
the
them are
insight
just posting
meditation timer.
regularly
Yeah.
through Instagram or through Twitter, and or through other social media that are out there. And they're providing regular content for people to experience and participate in. So, for example, every day I put up a chalice lighting for Unitarian Universalists, particularly, which is kind of like our daily prayer or our daily
Right.
meditation with intentions. And I also have a chalice out at the end of the day because we all need an end of the day, the creation of a container. And so that's a way to look at the evening prayer or evening meditation. And then I have a separate piece in the middle, later in the morning after the chalice lighting, that changes from day to day over the course of the week and over the course of the month on the weekends. Um, that's a special intention or focus. So that's one of the most common ways actually that people are sharing that stuff.
Right. So you've got your chalice light. And so what are I know that's especially on Twitter and Facebook, you share those?
I share those
Where?
on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
All right. At hashtag chalice light.
Chalice Light on Twitter and on and Facebook, and on Instagram it's Chalice Lighting.
Okay. I got to check out the Instagram. I'm still getting into Instagram.
But So one of the things that I do is it can be the same content, different platforms,
Right.
because we all use different platforms depending on our temperaments, our acculturation, where our spirit lies.
Right.
So if we're visual people for where our heart is or our spirit is, then we're going to be drawn to more visual media like Instagram, or YouTube. If we're auditory people where our spirit is, we're going to be drawn to things that have more music in them or are the spoken word, and you'll slow your podcast, or
Right.
again, you'll watch YouTube videos and listen to music and things like that, or Facebooking those group watching videos. The other thing is, if you're more a visual person, you may read, and that might be the thing. So the written word might be the most important to you. And a lot of people on Twitter really value the written word. That's a big focus there. So
Right.
it's really depending on choosing your tool first. Which platform you're going to use is the first part of discernment for spiritual practice.
Right. So yeah, we should talk about that discernment. So there's discernment around an intention around the social media tools, platforms that we're choosing to use ourselves, uh, and also the way that what we want to use those tools for. Because it's, are we on Facebook? Are we on Twitter? What social platforms are we using? But also, what are we using them for? Why are we using them? Why are we there? Can you tell us a little bit about just, how do we, just thoughts on being intentional about how we're using these tools? Like, what are some of the things that you encourage people to consider as they're using social media?
Right. So the first thing I ask people to consider is where their heart's at.
Mm-hmm.
So what is it that you're yearning for or that you need?
Mm-hmm.
What's missing in your life? Are you feeling like dry and bitter or angry or exhausted? And what kinds of things would help answer those needs? The second thing I ask people to do is get in the uncomfortable zone, the discomfort zone. And so that's to actually work against the algorithms that all these social media feed us of what's supposed to be more comforting to us, choosing different peoples that we would follow, different areas, trying out something that's harder than we would normally accept. So those are the first two.
So with the heart, what we need or longing for, but I love that notion of discomfort as it's almost you're talking about a spiritual discipline of going where there's discomfort in order to combat the algorithm. Why do you think it's important to combat the algorithm in that way?
Oh, it's very
and
easy
maybe just to make sure people know what's the algorithm
bubble.
we're talking about.
Yeah, so most of the algorithms are going to lead us towards what we like and find comfortable, and the algorithms want to tell us that's about trust. But we actually don't engage with folks outside of our little comfort zones, or people who are closest to us, if we don't work against the algorithm, and thus we can't learn to trust and develop relationships with people from different communities. And there goes the multicultural society that we need to live in. We're not working with pluralism, and we're also not stretching ourselves in the kinds of ways that we would interact on a daily basis. So we become less likely, I think, to engage with people who seem different from us, whether it's politically or spiritually or educationally, all kinds of ways, if we're not working against that algorithm.
So including like that spilling out into our life with people offline.
Yes.
So if we're constantly
live in these fairly narrow places.
People talk about, there's a lot on media coverage of social media. I'll talk about, all right, people are living in filter bubbles, and so you think of that as this bubble online where you're going online and spending more and more time with people who support your own thoughts and opinions. There's not as much talk about, how does that lead to our comfort? Well, I guess there's conversation, but I think it's just worth highlighting that then carries over to how comfortable are we, if we're spending our time in these zones where we're not being challenged or we're not having to have empathy, that as we're offline, the same, we become less and less comfortable. Hmm.
And less able at having those kinds of conversations. So if I only interact with people who have the same political views that I do,
Mm-hmm.
I'm not well served to meet my neighbor who has very different political views from me.
Right.
And to find ways that we can work together. And my neighbor's not being well served by only having those same feelings and thoughts reinforced. If for us to be able to continue to work in community, so that's pretty important, I think, to get in. The other piece about it is we're always going to have discomfort in our lives.
Mm-hmm.
We're always going to have times where we have to wait and we're not happy and we don't know what the outcomes are going to be and there's a lot of uncertainty. And so much of what we do in social media is oriented towards the quick click fix.
Mm-hmm.
That learning to hold onto ourselves and still a little bit and stay with that discomfort rather than try to flee it is pretty important.
So you say that there's a lot of what's online is catering to that, desire to click, and get
Sure.
get that immediate satisfaction, or just keep us constantly stimulated.
Yeah. So this is the difference between distraction and connection. So are you using the social media to distract you from how you're feeling and from your real life, as we would call it, or are you using it to help you connect deeper and more fully with your feelings and with other people in a larger community?
So what do you do? So for people who are not used to thinking about, and maybe as intentionally about what the way they're interacting with social media, and more just, I know that there have been times when I've used social media where, and this is something that I'm continually working to be in balance with, that say I have some free time, there's a pause between meetings, or I finish some work and I'm like, there's a pause before I start the next thing. And next thing you know, I've got my smartphone and I'm diving into Twitter, diving into Facebook, and I think you mentioned connection, this balance of, it was connection, and what was the other?
Distraction.
Distraction. So I think for me, especially someone who does a lot of work from home, when I'm not filming or working with an organization, it's like that's the time when maybe normally, before social media and the internet was so predominant in our lives, it would be, talk to a colleague, talk to someone nearby. But now so many of us can work in isolation. For me, I think it's all right, connection, I'm diving in for connection, but then it ends up being distraction. So for people who are, have that impulse looking for a connection through social media, what would you recommend in terms of practices or things to think about as they have that urge? Like, it's like you're suddenly reaching for your cell phone, your smartphone, and there's an impulse to connect.
Right. So I favor three things.
Yep.
One is to set a time limit to what you're going to be doing.
Mm-hmm.
So that you're returning back to this is a break from what we're routinely doing, and you're not going to wake up in 5 hours and discover that nothing else has been done. That's particularly important for those of us who work from home. And the second thing to do is to, before you stop, consider what you're going to connect with,
Mm-hmm.
who you're going to connect with, and what's the purpose behind it. So there's checking in with your feelings first about where your feelings are, and then considering what your options are and taking those two and putting them together with intention for this connective period that you've set aside. So I have 5 minutes and I really need to connect, mm-hmm. and I'm feeling lonely and disoriented, and so I'm going to go and seek this community or this meditative practice or this friend and colleague where I can leave an asynchronous time message and that person will get back to me when they have time. And then I'm not feeling so alone. And then the third piece about that is making sure that we change what those are over the course of the week. So I set different intentions on each day about what I'm going to focus on for connectivity. That keeps me, again, from getting used to treating one form of connection as the chocolate box of life and the other and everything else as not so desirable. Okay, well, maybe what I'm going to do here, because I'm feeling frustrated and upset around the news, I'm going to go and connect, and I'm deliberately going to connect and try to seek to understand somebody who votes very differently than I do.
Right. So over the course of the week, you have different intentions for how you're going to connect. Wow.
Yeah, I'm one of those people that the more rules I have about my practices, the easier it is to just do it, because I don't have to think about what then, so it's Monday, so this is the day that I make sure I tune into this other community. And it's Tuesday, so this is the day I tune into this community. And because I can't keep track of all of them.
And then also it takes energy. It takes energy if you have X number of ways that you could be connecting,
right?
Different purposes. If you're holding them in your mind all the time or having to go through them and make a judgment call day after day, that just takes energy.
Right. So I set my intentions for a year on how I'm going to handle my days of the week.
Other people, you're so organized. What am I doing tomorrow? Let me see. What am I doing?
In there's a digital Sabbath. So there is one day of the week that I am not engaging via social media.
What's the digital Sabbath?
Yeah. So on the digital Sabbath, the lights go out, and if I have, you'll still see me posting, right? Be automatically, but I won't, unless there's a major crisis going on, come back in to the social media to respond or to be with people in the larger social media community on that specific day of the week. And it's really important to set, because this is my work, to set it down. And to put it aside and to leave time for me to go and be still, or to spend time in wonder or awe or give thanks, or, just not to have any of that stuff that is regularly work. Other people might not think of it as work, but it's work for me. So that's what I have to set down.
And you use tools to schedule the content that you're putting out on your day when you're taking a break, your Sabbath, digital Sabbath. Their posts still go out, but those have been scheduled.
Yes.
Yeah.
When I have tools to schedule. If I can't, then it's on me to try to get it out before my Sabbath starts.
Right. So I think limiting screen time is something that I think a lot of us struggle with. So besides just scheduling, here's the day when I'm not using this technology, are there other tools that you recommend for setting boundaries?
I strongly recommend people turn off their notifications for rest and for their spiritual practice times during the day.
So if you've got your phone, see, I just turned it. Is this off? It's off. Yes, I'm talking to Naomi. I can't have my notifications going. No, so to actually have a time when you use your smartphone's settings to say no notifications, and then you just schedule. I don't think everybody knows that there's that capability. What does that look like? So you go in
so I use an iPhone, so I go into settings, and I'm establishing, there's a do not disturb function or sleep function that I set the number of hours for, and in that I can fine tune it to allow for, say, phone calls from certain people. So I'll still get notice from them through the phone, and I've
Mm-hmm.
I've asked those people to connect with me when it's between X hour and X hour
Right.
to make sure there's that. The other thing is when you're on the fly, literally, as you're going through your day and you need to stop those notifications, you don't need to go through the whole thing of setting those off. You just go to airplane mode.
Right. I've been working very hard not to think about that setting, switching it to airplane mode as airplane mode, but internet on and off. Am I going to be with the people who I'm with here, or am I focusing on work? So it's like, do I need to be plugged in or not? So it's like a real on off. And that's been helpful. I've been doing much more, blocks of time, say in the morning when I know I'm going to work on major projects, writing, developing trainings. In the morning, that mode.
Right. Well, you're talking about two different kinds of work. So there's the creative work that's happening in one spot and
Yep.
time and place in your schedule. And then there's the work of being with the people that is happening in another time. So, we all schedule that, whether we work in an office or whether we work in retail or wherever we are, there is time that we're at work in this way, and there's time that we're at work in this way, and then there's time we're not at work. So yeah, limiting the screen time is pretty important.
All right.
The
So
other thing that I do is I don't look at screens after 6 o'clock at night.
what are you
Except
talking about?
yeah. Except for I allow myself one class per month as an exemption. Because
Like
a
an
lot of
online
classes
course or
that I'm
something?
interested, like the leading congregations classes that you lead, is my one class of the month for this year that I am allowed to take at night.
I am honored.
Everything else has to be real. It has to be on demand
Right.
or during the day.
And that's only once a month. So you're
Right. So that limits the amount of screen time.
right.
So after 6 o'clock, I turn back to the printed text.
Yeah.
I don't watch TV. I don't watch movies. I don't engage visual screens at all, unless again there's an emergency. But saving a life always has an exemption from any of those sorts of rules.
Right.
But the rules are in place most of the time.
Right. And I just want to say, if any of our viewers have questions that they want to ask during the chat, we'll take a few questions if there are any. But we'll wrap up in a few minutes. We want to keep this relatively short. So one thing, just going back a little bit, you mentioned that the Insight meditation timer. I found that, just in terms of just positive impacts from technology, I've been meditating for years, like 20 years. But after I had a child and family life, I found that, and then also with technology too, that I haven't been meditating as much. And after our recent conversation, and you mentioned the Insight Meditation Timer, which is a free app that you can get other courses and things through it, I put that on my phone and started meditating daily using that. And one of the things it does is give feedback that how many consecutive days have you been meditating? And for me, one of the intentions that I set was I'm just going to make sure I keep that consecutive day going. So it doesn't matter how long I meditate. I just need to make sure I don't break the consecutive. That's been the best thing for my practice because it's such a simple thing. Like, all right, all I have to do is sit down. I could do a minute. And I find if I sit down and say, oh, I'm just going to do a minute just to keep the consecutive days going, I end up sitting for 5-10 minutes. So I think the tools and the feedback and some of the structure that can be offered can be really valuable. So as we move towards closing out this session, are there other forms of social media, digital tools supporting spiritual practice that you love and want to just kind of name?
So you mentioned the courses on Insight Timer. I really enjoyed a lot of those. I also very much enjoy the courses through Yoga Journal. And there are all kinds of stuff there. If you start looking for spiritual courses out there, you want to take a class in real time and on your own pace, there's all kinds of stuff.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things I think that's changed since 2008 when we really joined Twitter and we're starting to do stuff.
There's so much.
There's so much content. There's so many options. Really, there's no excuse now to say my flavor isn't out there.
Right.
And even if your flavor really isn't out there, try somebody else's flavor.
Hey, now, since we both work sometimes with congregations, sometimes when I'm talking about spirituality and digital life, I'll have some leaders say, why don't you just get everybody to come to where the local congregations are? Why do you need to do these things online? Can you speak to, why there's value for some people in being able to access these kind of opportunities online, and just, responsive people are like, why not just do it face to face? Why not just come to, like, say, where this community is gathered, whether it's a religious community or some other gathering?
Okay, so let's remember that the majority of religious communities in the United States are smaller than 200 people. And that means they can't afford to keep their doors and their programs open 24/7. With the way that we work around the world, wherever we are, we're in need of having a place to go that may not be available to us geographically. As a person in a wheelchair who doesn't drive, it also is beyond my ability to go out to a community frequently or to get in their building. So to participate with that. Many buildings don't have loop technology for those of us who have hearing impairments. They're not set up for the spiritual practices to provide them to folks through various accessibility needs. Language can be a huge barrier.
Right.
And who's going to watch the children if there's no childcare that's being provided, or if the spiritual practice that's being offered isn't available to children at the same time? Is the expectation only adults can do that? There's lots and lots and lots of barriers. Cost, transportation, timing.
People working during those hours. Yeah.
So, whereas, it's like TV use, right? Once you have a television, the ability for you to tune in doesn't cost you more typically. As you pay a set amount per month, and that's what you're doing, and you can tune into as many hours of that as you want. It's the same deal with the social media for a lot of what the content we're talking about. There's a very low barrier to entry into participation.
Right.
And no physical community is actually going to have a lower barrier unless you're talking about people living in the same building.
Right. So, fantastic opportunities. There's this amazing value for people who can't get to a local community, but also supplementing. I know I'm married to a minister, and I am regularly participating in a local community, but I love the different learning opportunities, connecting. We first met on Twitter. I mean, it's because of Twitter that I know you. So grateful. So grateful. So as we close, I want to say just thank you for all of your work, just in the larger world, on Twitter, and just inspiring me. How can people find you if people aren't already connected to you? Where can they find you? How can they connect to your work?
You can find me on Twitter, Facebook, both individually and with a public page.
Yep.
My public page is a lot easier to follow. On Instagram, on YouTube, and on my blog, The Wonderment.
All right. And I'm going to, as soon as we wrap this session, in the YouTube player, the description, I'll put links to that. So you have a new YouTube channel. Tell us a little bit about what you're doing with your YouTube videos.
Oh, so I've been exploring this very question that we're talking about, and I'm continuing to think about how do we best engage with different social media and for spiritual growth and practice.
Yep.
And so I'll be having more of those videos coming out, and as other topics arise, I'll be addressing those too. So yeah, I'm rebooting my whole YouTube channel culture.
Hooray for you for rebooting!
Yeah.
So appropriate. Digital. Let's reboot. Yeah, I'm thinking about rebooting some things in response to climate change. But that's a different session. Anyhow, well,
Well,
thank you.
so my old one was 7 years ago. Well, that's a lifetime ago in terms of visual and digital media. It's time to do stuff new.
Right. Well, thank you. I want to say thank you to everyone tuning in. Make sure you subscribe if interested to Naomi's YouTube channel, and just check out the other links for Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And just grateful for this opportunity to be together, both with you, Naomi, and the people tuning in, and those of you tuning in at a later time, transcending time as well. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Peter, and thank you for all the inspiration and work you do.